Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Eljay Johnsen Show. This show airs every single Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you have any questions over the week, feel free to email me at ljjohnson@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for myself or my guest today, feel free to head on over to Twitter at the Eljay Johnsen and ask any question your heart so desires. I can make no guarantee to whether or not it'll be answered, and certainly make sure that you follow me for updates about new guests every single Tuesday. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the show. So, my next guest is actually a talented artist and quite the skilled discusser of Lego. And just so happens to be the second Anderson I've had on the show. So now what I'm going to have to do is get the two Andersons to fight to the proverbial death. Notice proverbial, not literal. In order to see which is the best Anderson. Of course, they're both the best Andersons. I can't really decide which is the best Anderson, so we're going to need to get the third Anderson, Tommy Andresen, to come in and judge. I'm, of course, talking about Nick Anderson. How you doing today?
I'm feeling nostalgic now. Nick on Aquamagna, those were the days.
Yeah, see, I figured I'd refer to you by your name and not that, because you've kind of retired it.
Yeah, well, there's a problem. Anyone who wasn't a Bionicle fan, they kept calling me Nick on Aquamanga. Or getting it confused in other ways, like Nick on Aquaman, or Nicaragua 2, back when I still had a 2 on the end of it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Nick on Planet Ripple's
a
fair bit simpler.
Yeah, nah, because I've known you as Nick on Aquamagna, but I can totally understand why switching. Heck, even Nick in America on DeviantArt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Back when I called myself Nick on Aquamagna on YouTube, that was a couple years after I joined DeviantArt, and I wanted something that sounded kind of similar to Nick in America, something that had a similar ring, about the same amount of syllables, and so there was Aquamagna. But when I changed myself on one side, I changed myself on all of them just to keep it consistent, so that people who are introduced to me on one site could easily find me on other ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, of course. It makes a lot of sense to kind of be easily located all across the board.
Oh, another thing that was annoying, people kept calling me Nikon. They thought that Nick and On were the same word. They thought that that was my name. So now I've put a space there. It's clear, and now it doesn't have to be Nick on one thing. It could be Nick on anything. I can talk about anything I want in videos and just have Nick on at the front and then the subject.
Yeah, no, that's understandable, and I can see why people would do that because Nikon, the cameras.
Yeah.
So there's a precedent for it. So fair enough. Okay, so Nick, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into Lego, got into the community, and have at it.
Sorry, first I was going to say I watched the old interview recently, just because that was a few years ago, and my word of things have changed. Like you and the rest of TTV and
We've
the
changed
kind of
too.
videos you're able to make now, how the platform has changed, how I've changed, of course.
Yeah.
Hey, anybody who's listening, I am Nick Anderson. I am an author and a YouTube creator. Some of you may be familiar with my content. I've experimented with a lot of things over the years, but fairly recently, like just sometime last year, I started a series called Lego Rewind, where I look back at old Lego themes that aren't around anymore and just look at some of the trends they started, the influence that reverberates through more recent themes. Like in the Alpha Team episode, I also talk about agents and ultra agents because they're the same trope. And these videos, they haven't gotten that much attention because that's just the way YouTube works. If you're talking about old, obscure things, well, those aren't things that people are currently typing in the search bar, so you're not going to get a lot of stuff followed to you. But that's okay. I just have more fun researching old, almost forgotten things, and just trying to show my appreciation for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, no, I can 100% vouch for the Lego Rewind series. It is really fantastic, and we'll touch upon that in just a moment. I figure I'll ask you a couple of basic things, fairly standard questions. Like, what's your favorite Lego set? How did you end up getting into Lego as well?
Hmm. Well, I'm trying to remember what my first Lego set was. I got some really early '90s ones growing up. The first few, I'd never played with Legos in my life, but they were just handed to me because they could see that I liked building things. I know one of them was a rescue set. It was a boat that had like two noses. I think I may have shown that in one of my videos for a second recently. Then there was one from their Cowboys and Indians centered theme with a little teepee and some terrain. I really like that. And then what else? I always started getting Star sets around the time. Oh, there was a Taunton set that had a submarine with these little grabby arms that came with a stingray, some seaweed. Oh man, it was little things like that that made me love the ocean. Of course, I also have a place because I'm in Maine. I'm pretty close to the coast, so we go there every summer, and I go walking up and down, climbing on rocks, and it just listening to the wind, and it brings me peace.
Understandable. Yeah. I mean, I'm not much of an ocean guy myself. I moved away from the ocean specifically for that, but I can totally understand how certain
It should
ambiance
be
is
pretty
calming.
easy. I mean, when you look at some of the themes that I've enjoyed over the years, you start to notice a trend. A lot of them either take place in like underwater or on a water planet, like Aqua Magna, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Nope. That makes a lot of sense. Now, if you're gonna start busting out all the great seafood, then I'm gonna really notice. Okay. No! Don't eat it on my show. Okay. So, yeah, favorite Lego set. I think I asked. Like,
Yeah, no, I'm still trying to remember what it is because there are so many that I really liked from over the years.
well,
It's hard for me to say my favorite system set, though. You know what? This is going to be an unusual pick, but it might be the red, that mech from Life on Mars, the one with the claw and the flamethrower thing. Came with, I think his name was Antares. That was the pilot. I showed it in my Life on Mars video. Um,
I'm not
I got that thing
familiar.
as a I got that thing as a birthday present. I think it's called the Recon Mech. And again, it's one of the Martian ones. It was kind of a precursor to Exoforce. They were a little more primitive, but they had the same kind of charm. They were beefy. They had a little cockpit for someone to sit in, no visible head, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a friend got me that for my birthday, and I loved it. Actually, oh geez, almost tied with that was another Life on Mars set that I got later that year. Was this beige one that was like a giant scorpion, but it was just for mining. It wasn't made for battle, really. It didn't look terribly aggressive. It was just imaginative, and I like that stuff. My
It's
favorite,
understandable.
my favorite construction set. There are so many over the years, and I've modified so many of the ones I have that I'm not sure I can say they count because, I'd have to say, like, oh, what was your favorite out of the box? This probably sounds kind of silly, but maybe some of the Toa Metro.
No,
I mean,
that's not silly at all.
they're all basically the same anyway. Although I do love a couple of the Toa Mahi as well. Like, I love Mataro, such a unique build, and out of the Mahi, he's the one that I had to change the least because he already had such a unique look that was like all his own. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
I also love all the Glatorian, and then of course there are like a lot of G2 sets, controversial as that is.
Oh, no, I see. I agree. Personally, I'm a fan of Glatorian and G2 sets.
Yeah, they're so colorful. They looked elemental. Finally.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's great, and that actually, if we have the time, is something I might even want to cover today because I love how they managed to pull all those off.
I mean, geez, what better way to show that this is the ice guy than to have ice visibly growing on him?
Exactly. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Um, so all right, that's fairly run of the mill kind
So,
of.
in summation, my favorite Lego sets tend to be ones with like submarines or alien robots. So things like ocean themes and space. I've covered some of those in my videos, and also, of course, construction figures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can understand. You know me. I'm partial to construction and large buildings like Ninjago City. Do you like Ninjago?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Good. Okay, let's actually go ahead and dive real deep into Lego Rewind, because this, once again, is a really great series, and one that I'm surprised, genuinely surprised, does not have more viewership, because it really should. It's really fantastic.
Yeah.
Go ahead and
Well, again,
for those,
that's. Oh, sorry.
for those
Well,
that are
again,
unaware or unfamiliar, go ahead and kind of give us a summary of what Lego Rewind is.
Well, I made Lego Rewind at a time when I just didn't have that much time for making videos, not nearly as much as I did in years past. So I needed to do something that was a little smaller. It wouldn't take quite as long to edit, like just a few days as opposed to a week or two or a month, because yes, a couple of my videos have taken that long to make in the past. So I thought, okay, well, and I realized there were a lot of old Lego themes that I really liked that not very many people talked about. And so I thought, oh, I'll just do this short form documentary style series where I do some research about why they made the theme, things like that, and what a little bit about the story. Then I'll just give my thoughts on the sets and maybe some of the mocks people have made since then, things like that. Just to show that even the most obscure of these Lego themes can have an impact. There's a conception among some people that you start out as a construction fan, that you start as a fan of things like Bionicle and so on, and then eventually you come to your senses, stop playing with those kinds of toys, and graduate to system, to proper Lego. But as it should be clear by now, I've always liked both system and construction because I grew up with both of them. And so I just thought, oh, there are a lot of cool themes like Ice Planet and Life on Mars and Aqua Zone. And then, of course, there's some more recent ones that people might be more familiar with, like Exoforce and Knight's Kingdom and Alpha Team and stuff. So it's just been great looking back at these old themes, partly just to familiarize with myself with some of the sets, many of which I do still have a couple of from each theme stored somewhere and at least mostly assembled. And so I get to refamiliarize myself with those. Sometimes I'll even show like a shot of them in the video on my desk just so that people can see that they are real. But also I get to learn so many things about these themes that I never knew before. Like the Alpha Team episode, that was so much fun. I thought it was going to be a fairly short episode where I just glossed over the sets themselves because then I looked back and I found out about this entire basically another game they made that was eventually turned into an Alpha Team game. And the history on that just added so much more to the video because it's like, oh, wow, something about secret agents. What better than to start with a conspiracy? And like I have one I'm going to make pretty soon about dinosaurs, the various themes those appeared in and how they've changed. And I learned that, lo and behold, some of the first dinosaurs were in fact Duplo, not from that Adventurers line.
Huh. I never would have guessed.
You learn weird things about all these. Oh, and yes, Tobias, I did cover Rock Raiders. That's what episode 3 is about, and I also talk about Power Miners in that one. You see, that's the thing with a lot of these themes. I'll often say it's about one theme, but then I'll also show some of the other themes that have been made since. Like in the Life on Mars one, I also talked about Mars Mission. In the Rock Raiders one, I talked a bit about Power Miners and so on, because Lego does repeat themselves a lot. And it's just interesting to me to look at the influence that older Lego themes have had on new ones. As different as more modern Lego themes may seem, I don't think they would be anything like they are today without those older ones to kind of bounce off of or learn from the mistakes of. And it's just interesting to see like each generation, things change.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating to see how Lego sets kind of grow in a sense, because they start out a very particular way, very early on in the company's life. Or at least even in the 90s, the 1990s, they're very different to how they are now, where it's almost like somebody else is making them. It's actually really fascinating.
It's not even just the sets themselves. It's also fun to talk about the marketing And sometimes you look back at some of the cringeworthy commercials Lego made, and you wonder, what were they thinking? Who thought it was a good idea to put this out? Like the Ninja commercial with a hoi!
I saw the one. I know what you're talking about.
Some of it's just really fun to make fun of, but you also find some gems. But that's another element that's fun. Like at first, I just talked about the sets, but now I'm also talking about the marketing a little bit in each episode, because you do realize they go through a lot of phases where one thing might seem like a good idea for a little while, but then they quickly grow out of it. And it's kind of like when you exit your teen years and you look at all the things you thought you did when you thought you were such an edgelord, and you're like, oh, what was I look like a clown now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty relatable.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And old Lego marketing is one of two ways. It's either, oh my goodness, they didn't actually, they did, or in the case of Bionicle, it's like, yeah, that was what I needed to see, you know, because they were really, really great commercials. But go ahead and you working on dinosaurs next?
Yeah, and that one I'm going to talk about like all the dinosaur themes that have been released in order. I won't have that much to say about Dino Island because I already covered that in the Adventures episode. But I'll go over some of the early attempts at making animals that Lego made like back in the 70s and 80s. Then we'll see them become like the first dinosaurs, and I'll talk about those dinosaurs from 2001 that were a little bit nicer, and then how they, well, I know in your top 10 locations, you mentioned Dino Attack. Don't worry, that's going to be in the episode as well.
Excellent, good. I loved Dino Attack, so
It's actually going to be a major focus.
Perfect.
This is boiling just a teensy bit, but I'm kind of going to make fun of like how dark and edgy it was, because it is without a doubt the most violent theme Lego has ever released. Things have toned down a lot since 2005, but again, it's all in good fun.
Dino Attack being the most violent?
Oh yeah, look, make no mistake, they are not pacifying or capturing those dinos, they are slaying them. They are pumping them full of bullets and tearing them apart with their giant tanks and helicopters and everything. And I guess there was such a negative backlash to that, well, I guess there's not really any other kind of backlash, that when they released it in Europe, they had to change it to Dino 2010, where all the guns and other weapons were replaced with nets and cages, just made out of Technic beams. And that kind of had an effect on later dinosaur themes, because you never really saw that again. They made like those tranquilizer darts in the 2012 Dino theme, just because like, look, you see, don't worry, it's not as violent as last time.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. I'm just thinking, whenever I think violent Lego themes, usually what comes to mind is Bionicle. But I suppose as far as system themes are concerned, Dino Attack would probably rank high.
Yeah, they never quite went that far again, except with licensed themes. You know, when you do stuff like Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings, the bodies are going to hit the floor. Can't really be helped.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, that's understandable. Okay, I recently watched your episode, your latest episode, which was Lego Rewind on Exoforce, which I thought was particularly well done. I like the subject, of course, because Exoforce is a really fun, really excellent theme. And what themes, so that people know what to look for, have you covered?
Okay. In episode 1, I covered Ice Planet 2002. I was fascinated by that theme because it only had like 6 sets, and there are so many space themes, but that one just sticks out to people. And there's been so much fan art and so many mocks over the years. I thought this is like a treasure trove of intellectual property, basically, and I just wanted to bring light to it. It seemed like a good place to start. Then I made one about life on Mars and Mars Mission, where I showed how they've become a little more combat focused in recent years. Old Lego Space, you would get like an entire faction of good guys or bad guys, and they would each be treated as their own lines. And you could just have them interact in crossovers because they were all just part of a wider galactic community. But these days, you have two opposing factions, combat in a box, where you'll have a big build for one faction, then you'll have a little extra something in the set from the other side. And Life on Mars was special to me because that wasn't about fighting. Yes, the aliens could defend themselves with their mechs. I shouldn't call them aliens, they're Martians, that's their home. But they weren't at war with the humans or anything. The humans crash land on their planet, and they're like, hey, could you help us? And the Martians are like, sure. And that's it. That's the entire story right there. Just wholesome, working together, and kids don't want that. So they never made another theme quite like that. It's all, humans versus the evil aliens. And I just kind of miss that. I wish that they would make another thing that was just about discovery and exploring the universe and working together with other races. But I get it if Life on Mars was a little ahead of its time that way. And then I talked about Rock Raiders and Power Miners in the third episode because those themes are pretty similar. And I pointed out how, as much as people love Rock Raiders for the aesthetic and the story, it does have some flaws. Like the builds have a lot of giant pieces inflating the price. And if anything, the Power Miners sets are a bit nicer just in terms of the builds, in terms of being toys. So I just point out how both lines have their merits and some shortcomings, but they're both still great. Mm-hmm. And the fourth one, I focused entirely on Technic, everything except Bionicle, basically. I talked about the things that came just before, like Robo Riders and Slicers, but then I went further back to the competition line, to when they first started using beams that didn't have studs on them, and then I went further back. I basically went through 40 years of Technic stuff, just starting from Bionicle and rewinding from there. After that run, I changed things up a bit. I made a new intro. It's like when I made those first 4 episodes, that was really all I had planned. And if those didn't do too well, I figured, oh well, I guess nobody wants this. But even though not that many people watched them, the people who did, they really enjoyed it. Some of them saying that it was one of their favorite series on YouTube. And which is kind of crazy to me. So I'm like, all right, if it's something my audience wants, that, and I do enjoy making these videos, I may as well. And so a few months later, I made an adventures video talking about all the Johnny Thunder lines and his more recent appearances, like in the Lego Movie and a couple of those sets. Then I talked about studios, which was a good thing to follow that with because it did include some of the adventures characters as stand-ins or stuntmen, and it was around for that same time. And that one was about brick films and how there's always been the little filmmaker in us that wants to make movies with our Lego sets, and it was nice of Lego to try to facilitate that before things like iPhones took over and made their movie maker programs obsolete. And then I made the Alpha Team one. I already talked about that a little bit. And then a special video, and then the Exoforce video.
Wow. That is a wide selection of subjects. Now, I'll ask the obvious question. Will there be an episode on Bionicle?
That's the thing. I'm not even sure how I would do it. Because okay, do I talk about what each year was like? Should I make an entire video for each year? It's the kind of thing where I drip feed Bionicle through the other episodes. I very frequently mention it and make it clear that I do like it, and I sometimes compare things to it. Like in the Exoforce video, I mentioned Bionicle a couple of times because those started using the same balls and sockets after a while, and of course you see a lot of other pieces from it appear in that theme, like LX Claws, stuff like that. Maybe I'll make a Bionicle video someday. If it ends up being if I ever run out of themes to talk about, which will definitely happen at the rate that I'm going, maybe I could make 20 videos, maybe 30, and then I might run out of things to talk about. And then maybe I'll make the final episode about Bionicle. Because here's the thing, I try to make each one not just about a theme itself and the sets in it. I try to make a real theme for each episode. One may be about some aspects of marketing. One might be about, of course, the studio's line being about the filmmaker and all of us. I want to attach a subject to each one, not just the products. Like, I'm gonna have one that's mostly about underwater themes. I'm gonna have one that's mostly about dinosaurs. And of course, I am going to make an episode about girl themes. And I'm gonna talk about things like Lego Friends and elves at the end of it, to show how far those have come.
To be fair, elves is actually a really impressive theme. I'm quite.
Oh, I know.
I want to get more into elves. I have one set, and I want to watch a TV show.
I have been tempted to buy some of those sets just for the dragons. I see one of them on the store shelf, and I go, "Do I really want it? Yes, I do." But but I can't walk out of the store carrying this. People are gonna look at me funny.
I've oh man, after wearing the mask and just being a fan of Lego, I was like, who cares? Look at me, guys. I got an elf set. Do you have an elf set? You're not having as much fun as I am. So I've given up on that. I don't even care.
The point is, I want each episode to talk about a different thing, about a different trend. In the case of Exoforce, I got to talk about anime and how some people kind of appropriate that, make their own westernized spin on it that's really dumb. I mentioned stuff like My Life Me towards the end. So that was like that episode's theme, was Lego's take on anime and how it turned out surprisingly legitimate, as opposed to other things. So that's all I'm saying is I could make videos about every single theme, but it won't really be fun for me unless I can inject some bigger picture into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally understand.
Like
That's very
what
fair.
that theme represents, what sets this episode apart from the other ones.
Series finale, the brick. No.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I mean,
Man.
some people have asked me to make a Ninjago episode, but I don't feel right about it because Ninjago is still going.
Yeah, I wouldn't make a Ninjago episode if I were you. I would probably focus more on old castle and ninjas, because ninja is a subcategory of castle.
Yeah.
But
I'll have to make an episode of that someday.
yeah, but no, to anyone listening, I will never not recommend Lego Rewind. I also am slightly partial to it because it has, the rewind arrows like my recap reviews did, and I think that's just, clever usage. Of course, I'm inclined to say that. So, yeah.
Oh, jeez, I didn't even think about that. I swear I wasn't thinking about your logo when I made mine.
No, I'm not saying you were. It's just the rewind, recap, rewind. It's just, you think of that logo. It's common use. No. But anyway.
Believe it or not, there was a time when I was first thinking about doing this series where I considered possibly approaching TTV and seeing if they saw some value in this, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, I do not want to make these for TTV, because then I would feel committed. Exactly. It wouldn't be just a thing I could do for a hobby. I would have to make like an episode by a certain time, or well, maybe that's not how they do things, but that was what I was worried about, and then it would stop being fun.
Yeah, doing it how you're doing now is fantastic. Do it for you, because if it's fun, you're going to want to keep doing it. But
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead.
One last thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just one last thing I want to say about Lego Rewind.
Certainly.
And this would be a good segue into the next subject, I think. So, the special video, that was an April Fool's video. And some people didn't get the joke because I guess I pulled it off too well. I started it as if it was an Exoforce video. It had a pretty crappy Exoforce thumbnail that I intentionally made kind of crappy, and it had Exoforce in the title. It even starts as an Exoforce video, but a couple minutes in, it suddenly changes, and I have a few seconds where it gets really glitchy, and it's like we crossed over into this other timeline, like welcome to the Twilight Zone. And then you get this narrative I pieced together where Galador was a huge success that basically killed everything else Lego was working on, including Bionicle. Not even that, but Exoforce never even made it past the working title.
Yeah,
it was never released. Okay, so let's see. What else? Okay, so they abandoned Bricks and Technic. Bionicle wouldn't get a reboot for like 15 years. Lego focused on just making action figures and ended up so successful at that other companies like Hasbro and Mattel had to merge 10 years sooner than they were rumored to in the real world. Oh man, so many weird things. But probably the most depressing part, it was really fun getting to play this other Nick, this alternate version of me. I've never thought of myself as a good actor or a good liar, but if I really have fun with a part, I can sell it. And in this case, people thought I was being dead serious. They some of them didn't catch on that it was like an alternate timeline. They thought that I was like, oh, you know, they would take some that I said and not realize that it was just part of this narrative I was crafting. But what was really enlightening about it is we like to think that no matter what happens, no matter what changes, we would still be the same us. But nah. We're inevitably affected by our environment, and we're like a product of the world we live in. And so this other me starts talking about Galador like it was actually good, because that was the best thing there ever was. Nothing better came along because that completely took over. So all the great themes that we've gotten in this world, they just didn't exist in that one. So it's like my view of things kind of shrunk. And it's kind of sad looking at that poor Nick that just never got the inspiration to make his own series. And I was also trying to throw in a jab at how I do get kind of stressed when people ask me, please make a video about this or that thing. And I'm like, I already don't have that much time for making videos. And if I did just make them all the time, I wouldn't be able to follow my dreams. But, oh well, I still tried to make it fun. I didn't want to make it too depressing. But some people, they really got a kick out of the ending. Or you see how I turned out and how miserable I am. They're going to say, oh, well, at least there's still Galador.
At least this is still a thing. And Nick is brought up with Nick Bluetooth. No.
Yeah, that was all I've ever had. That me just didn't know any better.
Yeah, I thought it was very well executed. But all right, let's go ahead and very quickly, I'd like to remind everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to send those over on Twitter at the Eljay Johnsen using the hashtag the Eljay Johnsen Show. And then toward the end, we'll get around to questions, and eventually I'll open things up to the YouTube chat, and we'll go ahead and get toward the end of the show those questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and also discuss some of your more Bionicle-focused adventures in this instance. Now, I've got an image on screen of an illustration. It's actually being used for a thumbnail. It is of Liwa from 2001, which is a Bionicle set. And you have, and this is kind of a bridge, you have also ventured into artwork and making comics. Now, you've had two series. I know there was Toa, and then there was Nova Orbis. And go ahead and just explain those real quick, and go ahead and touch upon Nova Orbis and kind of give people who may be familiar kind of an idea of where that is and what the plan is for it.
Nova Orbis, I have not been able to continue it for a while. I had a pretty neat little plan laid out for it. I figured out I would get it done in like 4 years, but after the first 2 years, I slowed down. Other things came up that took me away from that. And as much as I would love to continue it right now, it would wear me out. I'm already pretty worn out from the last thing that I just recently finished, and I need to do something that's kind of simple, and that probably won't take that long to do in like one sitting before I move on to Volume 4 of my own series. I do plan to continue Nova Orbis someday, because it's not the kind of thing that'll just go on forever. I did have an ending in mind. I knew where I wanted the story to go. Most of those plans really haven't changed. It's just so hard finding the time for them, but I do want to someday. The last couple years have been pretty crazy for me, but if things like stabilize more, if I get into a pretty comfortable place where there isn't a lot of stress and I do have a little more time on my hands, then yeah, I can make time for Nova Orbis. I do feel kind of bad because I know that a lot of people who are still holding out, and well, some people have completely given up that it's ever going to continue. And I keep thinking, no, it will. I'll get to it. I just can't right now, and I know that people are getting tired of hearing that, and I'm sorry. Nova Orbis, if you want to know what it's about, well, there's an entire old TTV interview about that. But to summarize, it's it's supposed to be a sequel to G1, basically a soft reboot that takes place far enough in the future that the Matoran living on Spherus Magna have developed space travel. And so they start visiting some of the planets that Montanui visited in the 100,000 years like before the original story picks up. And well, there was one planet that didn't react very well to his presence. And so when the new generation of Toa and Matoran come along, they don't get the best welcome. And they wind up like having their own little island on this other world, and it's a pretty crazy story, but I just wanted to make something where I could include a few of the old characters, a little nods to it here and there, but develop an entire new culture. Because like I said back in that old interview, that was part of the nostalgia about it, was actually the new stuff that people had never seen before, because it gave them that same feeling of when the original Bionicle first started and they were walking into a completely new world. That same feeling that LEGO tried to create in 2009. I actually managed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm sorry that it's slow to a crawl. I'm sorry that the latest stories haven't finished, but I will finish it someday. Just a lot of stuff came up.
That's fine. It's perfectly understandable. And you also had another comic series by the title of Toa, and that was kind of a retelling of 2001 story, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, I had to take a break from that late last year because I realized that I was falling behind on another project of mine that I had hoped to finish by the end of that year. I buckled down, but it still took until like the middle of March this year. But again, I should have a better handle on things in the future. So I'm hoping that later this year, maybe just a few months from now, I will continue the Toa. And hopefully I will be able to finish it in one sitting. Maybe I can work on that in tandem with this more personal project, so I'll still be able to release a page of that a day or every couple of days and still find time to work on the other thing. It's just about finding a balance, which I haven't yet. And yeah, I'm sorry, 25 pages in, and I had to take a break from that too. But that one shouldn't be too hard to finish. I jumped into that because, well, I wanted to make something Bionicle related last year, but Nova Orbis was just too stressful. So I thought, I'll just make my own take on the 2001 story, kind of, but also throwing in things from all the other years of Bionicle. Things like Visorak appearing in someone's hallucination, little nods to the layer used, even a couple of nods to G2 I had planned. And I don't want to spoil a lot of things about the story, because if you think you know how this story is going to go because of how 2001 and 2 and so on went, no, I have a crazy ending planned for this. It's just a matter of when I can get to it.
Okay.
Yeah, my version of Makuta, his ultimate plan, even his layer. Like I said, it's going to draw a bit from those later years, because my approach to this was, what if you only had the 1 year to tell Bionicle's story, like originally? How could you keep it simple and streamlined, but still manage to throw in some things from other parts of the story to make it feel more complete? And that was basically my challenge with this. And again, I have a pretty good idea of how I want to do it. I think I'll be able to wrap it up pretty cleanly and satisfactory. So, because that's the thing, Bionicle was so big and expansive and complex in its later years. It's almost like you start 2001 story, but then you either leave it off on a giant cliffhanger with the Bullrock, or you just kind of leave the characters in limbo, where it's like, they're not supposed to live in this island forever. They're supposed to awaken the Great Spirit, so why haven't they? Mm-hmm. And again, I may have found a way to work around all of those things in this story. And that's going to be the major appeal of it when I do get around to it, when I do wrap it up, is that it will be a simple, clean, easy to follow version of the previous story.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, fair enough. And you said you right now it's kind of on a pause, but you will get back around to it at some point.
Yes, like I said, I had to take a break last year to work on Volume 3 of my own original series, just because I was procrastinating too long with that. But now that that's done, I am taking a break from that series. So before I get to Volume 4, I should be able to find some time for this before the year's over.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, I look forward to that. And I think that is a fantastic bridge into discussing your original series. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Planet Ripple. Now, I
Hmm.
have read what you've posted online, and this is kind of impressive. Like, I am impressed by what you've been able to pull off here. So go ahead and explain to anyone who may not be aware or may be unfamiliar what exactly Planet Ripple is and why would they be interested in it.
Well,
I know it's a bit of
before
a
I
bit
jump
of a
into
large question there. Sorry.
okay, well, not everybody knows this, but I'm autistic. And I don't really like how we're portrayed in stories in media, all the Lifetime specials and series and other things. Because it's like the ugly duckling. I've used this analogy before, and yeah, people are probably going to quote me on this, but with the ugly duckling, we know that the other ducklings are wrong to pick on him because he turns into a beautiful swan at the end. Well, what if he didn't? What if he stayed ugly, in quotation marks? Would that mean the other ducklings were right to pick on him? That they were correct to do it? Of course not. And it's kind of the same with stories about autistic people. A lot of people just don't know how to write autistic characters because it's like they get flanderized, where a character will be a screw up at almost everything in life, and yet they've got this one special power, this one gift, this talent, this quirk, and now suddenly everybody appreciates them. They were completely worthless before, but because he can count faster than a computer, now he's redeemed. Now everybody likes him. And that's just not how it is for a lot of us autistic people in real life. A lot of us are just trying to make it through the day and hope that people will make that a little easier for us. And, well, that's the character I've made for this story, Minnow, because she is autistic, and some of her thought process and experiences I've been through, things I think a lot of people can relate to. Like, make no mistake, I'm not trying to market this as a story just for autistic people, or even just for people who know somebody who's autistic. I did try to make this an interesting enough story that anybody could enjoy it, but that people who don't understand us would be able to understand us through Minnow.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's the basic pitch for it.
Okay.
The
And
thing
so,
is, I mean,
oh,
before
go
I
ahead.
explain more about the story, I want to say another reason that I didn't really like how we were not just portrayed, but really thought of on a larger scale. Around the like 2010, it was not okay to be autistic, especially like not on the internet. There was a huge wave of hatred towards autistic people that has kind of simmered down in recent years. But back then, things like streaming were first starting to take off on platforms like Ustream and so on. YouTube itself was smaller, and so it was easier to hone in on certain individuals. And back then, there were some YouTubers in those early days who were not the best of people, who frankly were kind of creepy, and they would do creepy things. They would treat people badly. And what was their excuse for it when called out for this behavior? They would try to get away with it by saying, well, I can't help it, I'm autistic. As if all of their behavior could be blamed on just that. And it created a really bad image of people like me. Certainly, people they focused on, and then they went, oh, you see, I bet they're all like this. I bet they're all freaks. When you look at someone like that, it's like, no, no, no. You don't get all of that from just being autistic. Someone like that clearly has other things going on and probably wasn't raised right. But people did blame it on autism for a while. And if it was revealed that you were autistic, if you were outed that way, people would harass you on the internet. And of course, they would, in part of my language, they would call you things like retard. I even bring that up in the comic because I figure some people will be able to relate to that because they thought it was the same thing. They thought that calling somebody autistic was just a slightly more polite way of calling them that. And again, thankfully, our image has been repaired over the years, but it was really bad for a while there. And I just didn't think it was right. So all of that stuff made me feel like, you know what? What if a story about an autistic character was made by an actual real life autistic person instead of somebody who isn't just commenting on it from their different perspective? Yeah, what a novel concept. So that's why I made this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that that's a very fascinating avenue to go down, and you know, pin it on me being ignorant if you will. that isn't something that I really pick up on very well. So I think that that is a very fascinating kind of avenue to explore that subject. And this,
Thank you.
I love also the kind of progression in the story you've got going here, not even kind of on a meta level, where you started off in the LEGO community doing comics like Nova Orbis and Toa, and then getting into Planet Ripple, which is completely your own thing. And if I'm not mistaken, it's up for purchase on Amazon, is it not?
Yep, all three books are available, like 25 a piece. Actually, the second one is about $26. I mean, sorry, the third one is about $26 because it ended up being a little longer than the others, so I had to charge slightly higher.
Mm-hmm. And see that is really incredible. Kind of like, again, on a meta level, looking at things and looking how you've been able to branch out and make this story to present to all these people. So, what is the story premise for Planet Ripple?
Well, just before I get to the real mechanics of it, I just want
Certainly.
to add one thing to what you said before
Go for it.
about not being able to pick up on that kind of thing. I actually kind of view that as a good thing because I didn't want it to be terribly obvious that the character is autistic. In some of the marketing, I might mention it, but within the story itself, it's not the entire point of her character. She is autistic, but that's not her entire persona. It isn't the only thing about her that's interesting. It's just something you can attribute a lot of her struggles to. None of the characters in the story ever call it out by name because I'm kind of hinting that they have a different word for it in the future because it's been so long. It's such a different world than what we have now. But I just wanted to have it manifest in her behaviors in small, subtle ways here and there, so that if somebody who does have a sibling or another loved one who has it, they might pick up on those small things like her not understanding why people pat her on the shoulder to scold her sometimes and congratulate her other times, and they might realize, oh, I think she might be autistic because I see that in some people in real life. That's my philosophy with anybody who has some kind of disability in the story. I don't want it to be the entire point of their character, and I often don't reveal it until a while after they've been introduced. There's a character introduced in Volume 2 who I don't reveal until like halfway through Volume 3, but they were born without a thyroid. And so their life is pretty difficult because of that. And this not a thyroid that's a little underactive. They don't have a thyroid at all. And so I bring up some of the things that come with that, some of the things that people I know in real life get asked that might annoy them a little bit. But you see, a fight started with that. If I pointed that out as soon as that character was introduced, they'd feel like a token. Like, hey, I'm the character who has this thing, and that's the only reason I exist. My philosophy is just make the character appreciable as a human being first, and then have that aspect of them make them even more interesting.
Okay, that is incredible. Honestly, I think that is a really unique way of going about and kind of bringing this to a larger audience, and that's fantastic. And
But that's the thing, is that I don't want people to just feel sorry for these characters. I don't want them to just pity them. I do want them to like the characters and then like feel even worse for them.
no, that makes a lot of
So
sense. That's understandable.
about the premise. This takes place thousands and thousands of years in the future, and the world has been completely flooded for a lot of that time. And I know some people are thinking it actually wasn't global warming. I'm going to reveal eventually that we had grown so advanced that we fixed all of those problems. So something else came along and basically flooded the world overnight. And that's a big part of the mystery is, oh, how did the world get to be this way? Which won't even be revealed until well into the story, until several volumes from now. These early volumes just kind of focus on Minno's life. It starts with her at rock bottom, and you gradually see her get better. So in this future, the world has been flooded for a long time. In that image on the screen, you can see some ruins, some like skyscrapers on the ocean floor. And it's so far ahead. It's been like this for such a long time that some people don't even believe there ever was any such thing as land. Some people think that they were cursed to leave the oceans on these ships that they've been living in this whole time. Again, just to show what a different world it is. But new land does finally start appearing. Well, where mountaintops in our time, they start to push through the surface, becoming new islands. And so a power struggle begins over who gets that land. And the elites of the world, they hire a vicious pirate gang, the Barracuda gang, to keep everybody else away, to reserve the land just for them. And Minnow ends up getting caught up in that mess.
Interesting.
And it just kind of spirals, on from there. One of the major themes of this movie is scapegoats, just like divide and conquer. Because Minnow does get a lot of flack, not just for being, a neurovariant, as people with those kinds of disabilities are called in this story, but also for being a cyborg. Cyborgs are pretty common in this world just due to things like infections or losing a limb in an encounter with a pirate, things like that. And it's pretty expensive to look after them. And so I have like their equivalent of things like healthcare or EBT, things from our time. And of course, some people, they look at individuals like Minnow and think that they're just kind of leeching off the system. When the actual cause of the world, of their economy stagnating it's not even just because of the pirates. It goes even further than that. But one thing I've noticed is when people in real life, powerful people, want to draw your attention away from them, they point at somebody close to you. It could be your neighbor, or just anyone who's an easier target, essentially. Like Eva brought up in the first book that some people, they don't like the current captain. But, of course, they don't want to approach him and give him a hard time, so they go after Minnow. Because she's small and fragile and just seems like an easier stress ball to vent their frustrations at. And that is going to be a major theme throughout the story. It starts with just her, but then it starts to escalate and you learn more about how their current society works. And again, how the powerful, they tell you, don't look up, don't look at us, look down. Turn on your neighbors, because then at least you will have the satisfaction of defeating somebody. Even if you have to make those close to you some kind of an enemy. And that's going to be like one of the prevailing themes of it, is that the villains of this story, the pirates, the people they work for, all sorts of people like that, they believe that humans need some kind of an enemy to feel fulfilled. That if we don't have somebody to fight, to assert ourselves over, that we can't be happy. And so they try to do that. They try to provide people with an enemy that will be easier to topple than themselves. And people like Minnow, they are the antithesis. They don't believe that at all. They believe that humans should lift each other up instead of kicking each other down to make themselves feel better. And so that's the major conflict of the story is, okay, well, what's more productive? Just bashing somebody because you can, because it might feel good for a little bit, or finding ways to work together and find peace for a more long-term, better future.
Okay. That's a fascinating premise. I like the way that you turned something as basic as land, as just flat ground, into a resource to be fought over in a world where that is now limited. That is really fascinating to me. And I think that's a really good moral center you have to the characteristics of each side.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's the thing. It's not just the autistic part. Because if it was just an autistic person's story and there was nothing else going on, yeah, it'd be kind of nice, but it wouldn't really stand out that much from the other stories that are kind of just a PSA. I wanted to make sure that there was an interesting world for Minnow to live in, that would like complement her and she would complement it, for her to not live in a vacuum,
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean.
And I'm pretty excited about the days to come because guess what? I got some good news. I'm going to be speaking at a library later this month.
Ooh.
I didn't even have to call them and ask if I could do it. They actually kind of reached out to me, which was really crazy to me because I spent so much time just working on the product itself and being exhausted by the end of it. And I realized, wait a second, I haven't actually done that much to promote this lately. Oh, no one's going to know about it now. And then, what do you know, lo and behold, something like that comes along. And so I'm going to get to talk to some people there. Maybe like some kids with disabilities will be there. I don't know. But I just hope that people will appreciate my story, both the fictional aspect of it and the real life parts of it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I saw that you did some speaking, kind of a Q&A at a convention these past few months, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, I did go to a convention and sell my books there, but that was not at a convention. That was at a place called Down East Horizons, which helps people from like their teen years to I think maybe their 30s who have various disabilities and may struggle with certain things. And they just thought it would be good for me to come there and talk to them, maybe inspire them. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was like where it started. And then somebody who was kind of connected to that, who happened to work at the library, well, they tried to reach me, and then it just went from there. And it's small, but I have a few other things planned this year. I am going to be going to certain conventions to sell my books to people directly, and that's how it starts. It's just we'll see where it goes from here.
That's fantastic. That is genuinely, not only does that sound like a really great story in the graphic novels, but I like just the meta narrative of you started here and now you're here, and that's really cool to see.
Thank you. Just two last things I want to point out. One about the latest book. This was the most difficult to make, just in terms of how much there was in it. Like I said, it wound up being the longest, but it also wound up being the most jam-packed with stuff. We have flashbacks to Minnow's childhood. We finally learn about what she was like in those early days. We see the repercussions of it now. We see more pirates, more types of merfolk. We see what life is like inside the pirate's flagship, with new locations, new everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be a little more straightforward in future volumes. But yes, this was the most difficult one yet. But I think it may have actually turned out the best because I picked up a few things that I didn't really the first times. I've made sure to number the pages this time. I've made the borders between the panels a little cleaner. I even made the coloring slightly brighter because of how the printers inevitably make it a little darker. So to compensate for that, I touched up some things.
Mm-hmm.
And last thing before I forget, um, oh shoot, I forgot what that. Whatever.
just missed it.
Oh well. Oh yeah, now I remember. I did release a trailer for it too. Uh, you can find that on my channel. It's about 5 minutes, but that's because it's covering scenes from the first two books, which I released like within a day of each other. That one was crazy because I've always thought the idea of trailers for books, especially text-based ones, was a little strange because you can't really show much except maybe a couple of sentences from the book itself, have some background graphic like flames or something, some kind of free domain, royalty free music playing with it. And I thought, well, this is a comic book. There are images, so I may as well make it feel kind of like a cartoon and have people read the dialogue out loud. And I reached out on Twitter, and word got passed along to some people. Some came from within my own fan base, but there were some like Andia Winslow, the niece of the Police Academy guy, Michael Winslow, who can make like any sound effect. Just so you know, like who that is. She wound up playing one of the characters, Andrea, Minnow's adopted mother figure.
That's
So
crazy.
she did her voice. And then Delilah Ali Rajah in numerous TV series like Grey's Anatomy and so on. Some of you may recognize her from that. She wound up voicing a merfolk. And some of these people, they wound up jumping aboard basically just because I asked nicely. And again, I didn't, you wouldn't think stuff like this would come that easily, but I guess it's just because they see what the work represents, who it's standing up for, and they want to support that. They want people with disabilities to be seen more legitimately, and if this makes that happen, then they wanted to help make it happen.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
crazy.
that all
That
worked out.
that is the opportunities that I'm sure this has opened up is just simply fantastic. All right.
Thank you.
So I like I said, go ahead and check that out, guys. I highly recommend giving that a look. We do actually have one email question for you, Nick. And this
Mm-hmm.
comes from Leo Xander, and he asks, ask Nick if he has a favorite character's design that he has made over the years, and also what location in Bionicle he would have liked to have seen explored more in the books or serials.
Hmm. Well, there is Boda Magna. Let's see. I mean, there's a lot of alternate dimensions, but yeah, let's try to keep it to the main story. I would have liked to see the Red Star explored. I don't know if that was just going to be a few rooms or like a hospital, or if there were going to be entire terrariums inside it. But that supposedly there was going to be a year taking place on that with like zombie characters because they were brought back to life, kind of half formed or whatever. That would have been cool to see. But of course, I would have been interested to see Boda Magna. I would have been interested to see the Valley of the Maze as it would have been portrayed in the movie if they ever made one. There's a lot of locations in Bionicle that I wish were more fleshed out. As for a favorite character design, I've made a few over the years that I liked. I'm pretty happy with Samus's new design that I made for her in Metroid Revival, though I made a slightly updated version for another Metroid project I wanted to do, but couldn't quite find the time for. I had fun drawing Devilman, but yeah, I had a lot of fun drawing the Toa recently, but I'm not sure I mean, yeah, you could say they're my spins on those designs. The Toa are probably the biggest departure from how they originally looked, but most of my completely original designs are from Planet Ripple itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to pick a favorite, I'm really happy with Minnow, partly because of the color choices, where she has reddish hair, but then she has those bluish lavender cyborg limbs, and then the seafoam green suit. So that those complement each other well. I also just really wanted to draw a character who had freckles, and so that was fun just drawing her. But there's another character that I'm really happy with is Hack, one of the pirates. As soon as he appeared, people they fell in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of it may have been because he didn't swear a lot. I didn't just make him like another Negan type of character. I didn't go too far. Some may have noticed that there isn't really any swearing in Planet Ripple. That's just because I try to come up with more creative things for people to say, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes it actually makes the dialogue funnier. Like going, the second one of you piddles yourselves like frightened puppies. It's when someone could have just said something more profane and simple.
Yeah. No,
It wouldn't it wouldn't
understand.
conjure up such a specific and kind of funny image in their heads if I just went with something more base. Anyway, so that was part of it, but people also just liked his design. I've gotten a few pieces of fan art since I released Planet Ripple. There was this one guy who made a pretty cool rendering of Hack. So I'm pretty happy with his design. It's supposed to look kind of like he literally took pieces of a sea scorpion, ripped them off the carapace and just put them on himself as armor.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also very happy with the design of a few types of merfolk that have appeared. There's the dolphin merfolk, which are a little more like us. They have fully working lungs. They have freckles themselves. They give birth to live young, stuff like that. Then I have some other kinds that are a little more fish-like, like angel folk. I'm pretty happy with those. Those are basically cuttlefish people. They can change their skin color depending on their mood. They're a little more fragile, not really made for being out of water. Probably the most fun I had with their design is that their teeth have fused together into just two weird giant teeth, a top tooth and a bottom tooth, and they fit together like a beak that you would see on a cephalopod. So because of the ways their lips had to be shaped around that, it's given them an awkward, permanent smile. Even if the edges of their mouths are frowning, the middle of it still goes down.
Yeah.
So I try to give all my characters quirks like that. So I'm happy with a lot of things I've designed over the years. But in terms of things that I made completely from the ground up, that weren't just my take on a thing that already existed, I almost can't decide, because I had to design everything in Planet Ripple. The ships, the characters, their clothing, the locations, the machinery, the pirates, trying to keep them from all looking the same. It's weird because I started with just a few things like Minnow herself, and those things eventually started to pile up. And then, like, when the book was almost done, people would look at it and go, wow, did you design all of these? And I'm like, yeah. It's almost like I did it without realizing it. And then I look back and I go, wow, I basically got a whole toy line's worth of stuff here.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the last thing I want to point out about, to answer that is, I did try to make these look like they would make fun toys. Like, imagine Minnow herself, because she has her cyborg limbs. She was born without arms and legs, which itself is kind of an allegory for how she feels when interacting with other people. She reaches out and she touches something and she doesn't feel anything. So for her, it's like her watching somebody else's brain. Watching somebody else's arms and legs do what her brain tells them to. And that's also how she feels sometimes, just emotionally. There's like a disconnect with other people, and she's trying to close that gap. But imagine her as a toy, where you would have the basic figure herself, just the head and the torso, but you could take off the limbs and switch them out for like more advanced looking ones that might appear later in the story, or like grabby hands and closed hands, kind of like some Figmas and things. You've got her suit that she can fit inside of, because they can just pop off her arms and legs and then sit her in there, and then it becomes basically her arms and legs, and those could probably be changed out. And then you have some of the pirates who seem to switch out body parts for certain encounters. And it's made me realize, wait a second, if this ever were a toy line, it would basically be Galador.
Oh no! Oh no! Well, sorry, man. I'm gonna have to completely rescind all my endorsements. I can't.
I know. Oh jeez.
No.
Just put Jens's arms and legs on a. Just joking.
Oh boy, that's great. Alright, well, we should probably go ahead and wrap up, man. Been going for about an hour, and I appreciate you coming here and telling me all about Planet Ripple and discussing Lego Rewind. But at the moment, we'll have to go ahead and wrap things up. Please.
Is it okay?
Go ahead and tell us where people can find you, where you would like people to follow you on social media.
Yes. On DeviantArt, I call myself Nick on Planet Ripple. It used to be Nick in America, but you can find some of the art I'm currently working on, a comic I'm doing right now, just as like a side project. And there is a folder where you can read the entirety of Volume 1 for free. Because that's a pretty standard practice. Is some people that release the first book for free and then just say who'll pay for the other ones. But it is a fairly old version of it. I did tweak some things when releasing it for print, so it is an ultimately inferior version. So if you want the best version, you can go ahead and buy the print version after you read through it. If you end up really liking it, if it gets you hooked. Of course, you can find me on YouTube right here pretty easily. I also call myself Nick on Planet Ripple. On Twitter, I call myself Nick on a Ripple because I couldn't fit in the entire name. Oh well, I go and just call myself Nick on Planet. Mm-hmm. I'm on other sites like Facebook and Instagram as well, but I like to keep those a little more private. I mostly save those for interacting with family. But there is a Planet Ripple Facebook page, and most importantly, there's a Planet Ripple website, which I made using Wix, and you can find basically everything there. You can find the trailer and a couple of original pieces of music that people composed inspired by the comic that end up being used in the trailer. You can find links for those there. You can find information about me and the characters and links to the books on Amazon. And let's see what else. I know that there's something else I was forgetting. Oh yeah, you can even find an archive there with links to all the pages on DeviantArt. So I try to keep all that stuff closely linked together. I even have a Tumblr page, though I haven't really used it that much. But that too is linked at the bottom of my website. In fact, I should have just told people to go to my website and they could find my YouTube channel, my DeviantArt account, and all those things there, and a bar at the bottom. Oh well. All right, before I forget, one of your previous guests, your first guest, Tenaglia Studios. Did I pronounce that right?
Oh, yeah, episode 0-ish. Yeah.
Okay. He wrote, I just bought a bunch of Exoforce sets after watching this because of this video. Nick, you have influence over my purchasing habits. Oh, I don't know what to do with this kind of power, man. I don't know if I can wield it responsibly.
All right, DT, you know what you have to get next. Pick up some Planet Ripple, and that way he will have assumed direct control.
Waj was your old editor, right?
Excuse me?
Waj, was he your old editor on TTV?
Yes, Waj. So he initially was a moderator and admin on the message boards. He recently resigned. He did a fantastic job, as well as the editor for Brickfeed and the top 10s for TTV. Yes.
Well, he did something that moved me recently. He said he had heard good things about the book, so he bought all 3 volumes, like on the same day. I'm like, whoa! And I was just wondering, wait, where did he hear about this from? Did he hear about it from you? Did you tell him about it?
I don't think we ever had a conversation about it. I saw that he posted about it and
Oh,
picking
wow.
them up on the message board.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yep.
Neat.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic because I saw that. I was like, well, this is perfect.
Well,
'Cause-
I hope it's okay when I do eventually resume the TOA and I post those pages there with like a link to where they can read on DeviantArt. I hope that that's okay because people will also be able to find Planet Ripple there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And for anyone wondering, I will link as many of those social media links in the description below. So make sure to check those out. And also a link over to Planet Ripple on Amazon. So definitely go ahead and check those out as well. So Nick,
Oh, Wash found out about it from my channel. Well, thank you, man.
there we
I didn't
go.
know he was watching me.
Yeah, that's perfect. And yeah, go ahead and check out the channel as well. Links in the description below, of course. Nick, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk about all these fantastic things.
Thank you. I mean, who knows where we'll be in another 3 years?
Yeah, no
We're talking
kidding.
again.
And I'll have to if you get Toa back up and running and have another release for Planet Ripple, let me know, and we'll need to have you back on.
Oh, sure. So, yeah, we didn't talk about everything here, just
Oh,
what we
just
could fit
yeah.
into the span of an hour.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more we can talk about.
So thank you everybody for watching. Thanks for the support. I appreciate every bit. And yeah, wish me luck. 'Cause I got a
Good
lot on my
luck.
plate, and I'm trying to find time for all of it.
Good luck. All right. Thank you all so very much for watching. This has been the Eljay Johnsen Show. The show airs every single Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If there are any changes in that, I update that information over on Twitter at the Eljay Johnsen, as well as the hashtag the Eljay Johnsen Show. So go ahead and head on over there to make sure you get all of the latest updates. I also make guest announcements every Tuesday. So thank you all so very much for watching, be it live or be it the recorded version that will be up on YouTube, hopefully within the next few hours. Once again, thank you all so very much, and we will see you all again